our children. So we talked about so many different things on here. We've talked about sex as marriage. We've talked about Adam and Eve in marriage. We've talked about some different things as far as love language so far. We've had some really good conversations. Excuse me. Mm, I don't know where that just came from. Mm, sorry about that. But we've had some really good conversations regarding this. Um, and so, as we continue talking about marriage, raising the children is important because raising the children, number one, if we be real about it, um, raising the children is kind of a big reason why we have issues with marriage today. If we just be honest, because of how we were raised. And even if we had great parents, it's not to say your parents didn't love you or anything like that, but our parents don't really teach us about marriage, right? Like you have great parents who love you and stuff, but our parents, there's very few parents that actually teach you how to invest, right? There's very few parents that teach you how to make sure, like there's very few parents that were giving you marital advice at 6 and 7 years old, right? There's very few people that are raised as our culture demands. Even when our culture says, "Hey, if somebody's being raised and they're a boy, then a boy should learn from his father, and he should be around his father starting at age 7." And but you send, our cultures that demands that we send them to a school and allow somebody else to train them, right? And then we get frustrated. We're like, "What happened to these children? I don't know I don't recognize my children anymore." Well, train up a child in the way that they should go, so when they get older, they won't depart. Did you train them up, or did somebody else? That's why we spend a lot of times with our ministerial training, making sure those that are going to do it, if anybody's going to train them, it should be me. Why would I send them to somewhere else and then be surprised if they don't speak kingdom language? If anybody should be responsible, it should be me, so I can look myself in the mirror and say, I succeeded or failed based off of my own efforts. Not I'm hoping and trusting that some person that I don't even know will do well with my babies, so to speak. I know that's not. I'm like in the marriage and the ministers and training to the same thing in my mind. But we had this weird conversation with each other or with ourselves. How is it that on one end cognitive dissonance, right? On one end, how is it that babies are out here acting a fool and growing up into adult babies, and then on the other side, we don't want to raise babies? It's a dilemma. However, it shouldn't be as much a dilemma as we think, because however you train a child, they should go. And something that's very interesting about training a child, when we talk about specifically Avde or Hebrew culture, Yashdil or Israelite culture, um, it starts a lot of times with the father in almost everything. Not every aspect, right? But the father is the one that's going to basically. We have it in society where we're raised different. We have it in society raised where the mother is the linchpin of everything, and mamas do so much. Don't get this twisted, right? But fathers, a lot of times in our culture, and if you're an American, especially if you consider yourself one, or are trying to become more Eurocentric in thinking, you have to begin to have men. Either either be men that are very distant from their children, or men that are very effeminate, or men that are both. um, how can I tell you that? Because naturally, even if we were to use statistics that are given to us by the Republic of the United States, as much as they will tell you that black men are the problem, and black men steal and rob, and black on black crime, and all these different terms that people give us, right? As much as people would say all of those things, hey, shalom, Benita. I'm sorry, I didn't see you say that. As much as people say all that stuff about us, right? Tell us all those things. One of the things that they will not tell you is that black men, percentage wise, even if they're not in the most in the home as far as marriage is concerned, percentage wise, they are the most involved with their children, black men. And another thing that they won't tell you, percentage wise, is that black men actually spend the most quality time with their children. So we have a nature within us to actually want to be with our children. Um, However, we are still fighting that Willie Lynch syndrome piece, right? Which we have, what is it, 13, 14 parts, something like that, on YouTube, so you can delve into some of that stuff. But there's a scripture we've talked about a lot, including in the Willie Lynch syndrome, because Willie Lynch taught that one of the ways that you make sure that you get rid of, or that you, he said he said basically the only way you come out of what's been done to black people as a whole is that you have to, is that fathers have to become fathers again and mothers have to become mothers again. And in the training phase, you must become husband and wife. That's great. Or I'm sorry, in the marriage phase, of course, sex is marriage. You must be a husband and a wife first. However, after that, you must be what? Father and mother to the next generation. If we were ever start to become father and mother again, it says that's when you change the tide because you train the next generation to become that which you need them to be. There's a scripture that we're going to read. We kept reading it over and over again. We were in the Willie Lynch letter because he kept talking about the fathers and the sons being apart. And this is how important a father is in the home, right? So this is after Malachi is usually the only thing we normally do in Malachi. The only time you really hear people preach, teach, read, etc., talk about Malachi is usually when they're talking about Malachi 3, when they want you to open up your checkbook, right, and pay your tithes, right? And they don't even talk about it, right? They just want you to pay 10%, right? Just blindly. They don't want to tell you what it says, the tithes and offering for, any of that. They just basically like, hey, he's going to open up the window of heaven, right? And they don't want to explain any of that. They just say, open up the window of heaven, pour you out a blessing you can't receive, so give up your money. And that's basically all we do with Malachi, right? But there's something interesting. Right after it finishes talking about the tithe, we get to chapter 4, after it explains what the tithe is really supposed to be for and how it's going to help your crops to grow and how it's going to help to make sure that the community grows. And it talks about how, you should take it to Levites if they're doing what they're supposed to do, and the widows if they're in position as far as their family to do so, if their families aren't taking care of him, and the poor and the stranger and all this different stuff. Malachi chapter 4 then, and this is the end. This is the last chapter before Christ comes. This is basically about, at least is agreed upon, that this is about 400 years before Christ is going to show up. You don't see any other thing written in your Bible. It's for 400 years, and then Christ shows up, according to what the agreement is, right? There's some people that would argue against that. Bare minimum, we would say this is the last. This is the last thing prophesied before we're going to see the book of Matthew. Okay, and so Malachi chapter 4, verse 6 says this. Everybody, but matter of fact, we're going to start at Malachi chapter 4, verse 1, because everybody likes to talk about all the other stuff. I want to show you the importance of a father, of a parent. Malachi chapter 4, verse 1. For behold, the day cometh that shall burn as an oven, and all the proud, yea, and all that do wickedly shall be stubble. And the day that cometh shall burn them up, saith the Lord of hosts, or saying Yahweh Elohim, that it shall leave them neither root nor branch. But, so cancel that out, but unto you that fear or respect my name or respect my authority, shall the Son of Righteousness arise with healing in his wings, and ye shall go forth and grow up as calves of the stall, and ye shall tread down the wicked, for they shall be ashes under the soles of your feet in the day that I shall do this, saith the Lord of hosts. So they shall be what? They shall be ashes under the soles of your feet, right? So it sounds like you got some authority. This sounds great. Verse 4, remember ye the law of my servant. Okay, so this is going into when Christ is going to show up. Last thing before you get into this quote unquote New Testament that people like to use, he says, last thing, he says, hey, we're going into this thing. People are going to try and get you to get rid of law. Don't forget what? The law of Moses, my servant, which I commanded unto him in Horeb for all Israel with the statutes and judgments. Verse 5, behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet. So that's the spirit of Elijah that we talk about all the time. I will send you the Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And what's going to happen right before the dreadful day and coming day of the Lord? Verse 6, right here. It says, and he shall turn the heart, who? The Lord, Yahweh. It says, he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse. So if fathers don't get it right with their children and children don't get it right with their fathers, it says he'll smite the earth. That's how important a daddy is, a father is. That's how important it is, right? How many classes did we receive in church about marriage? I'm not talking about when you were trying to get married and somebody said, pay me to do some counseling. I'm talking about how many times did they give classes and stuff specific on marriage and say we need you to get this. Now some churches do it, some churches don't. How many times did they get into it as far as even teaching something as simple as sex as marriage? How many times did they say we need to have classes and make sure that fathers are learning about how to be fathers? We just want a class for fathers. Not a check this out, not a men's ministry. Not all the brothers are gonna go to play pool this week and blah blah. Which yeah, we need some of that by the way. Like sometimes brothers need to go just do some stuff that brothers do. But how many times did they have a class where they're just like, you know what, we want fathers to come in. We're just gonna teach you about being fathers for a while. We're gonna take 2-3 months, and we're just gonna focus on being fathers. You didn't really get that, right? How many times in school? How many schools make sure that they have classes just on fatherhood or motherhood? I'm not talking about home economics. I'm not talking about learn. I took home ec. Home ec just is you make some pancakes, right? You learn how to crack an egg and hopefully not put a whole bunch of shells in the pot. Maybe you learn a little bit about sewing. No, I'm talking about as far as a mother. Like, what is a mother besides just somebody that has a child? And just having a child make you a mother. You know, that's always interesting too. I hear that all the time about men. Right, you know, just because you're a man, it doesn't make you a father. Well, just because you have a baby don't make you a mother. I mean, I've seen some jacked up mamas out here. I've heard some stories. I used to think before I started, Brother Kenyatta, before I started doing life coaching sessions with people years back, I used to think that it was very rare for women to not be in their children's lives or to just be jacked up. Oh my goodness, I was wrong. There are some messed up mom, and I didn't know because and I mean I'm biased. I'm a mama's boy, right? Like many men are, but like my mama was there, and she gave almost her last breath just to make sure that she stayed alive because she was supposed to be dead by the time I got home from my command, and she stayed alive just long enough to tell me that everything was going to be okay, that I was handsome, that she loved me, all the stuff, and give me a pep talk. And I thought she was gonna be okay. And then as soon as I got back to my command, they told me she had died on the way back. Like that's the mama I had. Like somebody was giving everything. I didn't know that there were mamas that didn't do that. At least not on a regular basis. I thought it was weird to me. But the parents are not in position. Right now, we talked about something. You guys can go study this. I'm not going to open up the Bible to go here. We've talked about this in some of our recordings as well. But I want to bring up some of these scriptures that I'm going to be discussing tonight. Of course, you can go to the curses, Deuteronomy chapter 12. You can start at verse 50 or so and read on. Remember, we talked about in Deuteronomy chapter 12, and we started talking about the curses. We got to around verse 50 in our lineage series, and we started discussing. Um, we started discussing being tender. You guys remember that word? Tender, being unprepared. Yeah, Cassandra. Yeah, not too many people teaching this stuff, right? So tender means to be what? Unprepared. And it says there that because fathers are unprepared, what normally happens is that mothers are unprepared. And when mothers are unprepared, then they start to look sideways at everybody around them. We call it the angry black woman syndrome, right? But they are not protected. They don't get what they need, and everything's just thrown on them. And so, because everything gets thrown on them, and they're not even prepared to be mothers, let alone to have everything thrown on them, then they start. It says they look sideways at their husbands. It says they start having hate in their heart and doing weird stuff towards their children, their daughters, and their sons, because fathers are not in position. That's it's key to catch some of this stuff. How are you going to raise children if you're we've talked about some of this stuff already. So we talked about that marriage is what? It's not between a man and a woman. It's not any of this slick stuff either that you hear people say that I now pronounce you man and wife. Nope, marriage is not between a man and a wife. It's not between a husband and a woman. It's not between a man and a man. It's not between a woman and a woman. It's not between an adult and a child. It's not between a child and a child. Marriage is between a husband and a wife, right? So you got to be qualified, and you must be qualified to become one. Sex is marriage, to become one. After we go past that and we recognize that and we realize what's going on with that and these lessons that we've learned so far, now we still have to get to a place to where are you one in your ability to raise your children, and what is that oneness coming out of? One of the things that messes marriages up more than anything else is disagreement and how to raise children. Straight up, anybody married will tell you that you've had some kind of argument about I was raised like this, well I was raised like that, and that don't even matter because you got your own children. Number one, well my mama she didn't spank us. Well, shoot, for real, for real, for real. Look, little Kofi, that dude was a monster, and he needed some spankings, right? So I don't care what your mama did. You wasn't gonna deal with me if you wasn't willing to pull that belt out, right? And there's some things I tell people to this day that there are still people be talking about. Oh, I don't steal because the Lord and blah. I tell people straight up, I remember my father's belt, so I don't steal. That's why I don't steal. Like I was homeless a few times and wanted to reach for them chips, but I didn't. I didn't say, well, I'm just going to trust the Lord. I remembered my father's belt. Right now, I'm not mad at the homeless man that reaches out for the chips. I'm just telling you what I remember. So before I remembered the Lord and all of his goodness and his piety and being one with him and kind with him, I remembered my father's belt reaching out and hitting that behind and saying, "You don't steal." And I said, "Oh yeah, that's right." So even in my late 20s, I remember trying to reach out for something. Oh yeah, that's right. I don't steal because Daddy might. That's real talk. Like I go to Daddy's house to this day. If his garbage, they say, "Dad, you need me to take garbage out, sir?" Because dad was disciplined me and I wasn't that disciplined. And really it took some military discipline too, because I was still off the chain, if I be honest. Somebody within the military had to get me. I had to go on restriction, brother Kenyatta, to get myself together. I ain't even gonna hold you. But I had to learn through discipline is the key point. And how you discipline the children has to come from one place. So why not make sure it's an agreement from the word of Yah, right? Why not make sure that we discipline our children even through this as one? We don't have to have a fight as to whose way is best, because if we can agree that Yahweh's way is best, then we should just raise them the way that Yahweh says. You said that's the mama's boy. Hey, well, you can say that's the mama's boys. I don't know. There are a lot of brothers that get spankings, whether they mama's boys or not. I don't know if being a mama's boy is necessarily a bad thing. You got to learn how to be weaned from mama. But shoot, a real boy, or shoot, a young boy, he should be, he should make sure that his wife comes first. But I don't know, because mama, because here's the thing, even about mom and daddy, right? Uh, I guess we'll skip ahead to some of this. Like mom is the first place that we learn anything. We touched on this. I don't know if we touched on this in class or in the line, but mom is the first place that we learn emotions, right? And by the way, like your five senses are emotions. Emotions mean the motions, the movements. So, what are your five senses? What? Touch, taste, smell, hearing, and what's it? Touch, taste, smell, hearing, and feel. Right, and feeling. So, if mom got angry when you were inside the womb, and when mom got angry, you saw anger in the womb. That's where you learned from, right? When mom wasn't feeling so good, you saw what that looked like in the womb. Sometimes you were protected from it, but you still saw what it looked like. When mom could taste, or when mom got angry, you tasted anger. You have to be careful with how where women are and how stressful you are. We talk about to put stress on the baby, because if mom's stressed, the baby's stressed. Well, literally, the baby tastes whatever mom is. So if mom's stressed, the baby actually learns how to taste stress. So there's a lot of stuff that we learn from mom, and then even as we get out of mom, we eat from mom, because we still have this thing to where we're eating. So whatever mom is giving us so if mom's yelling at somebody while breastfeeding, we're still tasting anger. Like there's a lot of stuff that we learn. So we're training up a child in every single area of our lives, right? Um, so the last thing I want is for my wife to constantly and consistently be upset when she's trying to breastfeed during that age, because that means that she's going to be not only will her body be going through stuff, and obviously have to be messing up enough to make her angry. Also, though, it means that I'm teaching my child that anger is a normalcy, because the child is supposed to get whatever it gets from mom. Now it gets some of the stuff from dad, because like not only it's oxytocin and stuff will raise when dad's around and stuff like that. So dad and the baby and the mom, they actually help each other through the process. That's why we talked about we briefly touched on the fact that like when a baby's inside mom, that basically in our culture, that's why you hear me say happy born day. I don't say happy birthday, because when you say, because born, the baby is born, so that it's the baby's born day, right? But the mom gives birth, but also the dad gives birth too, believe it or not. In our culture, that's how you think about it, because the baby basically is allowing the father to become a father. He has never been a father over this child before. Even if you got 5 children, before you have the sixth child, guess what? You're giving birth to a baby you never had. So this baby is allowing you to become that. become a father again. Therefore, you're birthing it. The mother, of course, is birthing it as well, right? And then the baby is born from those two. But the baby is making them a mother and a father, meaning that the baby is also giving birth to parents, right? We're even talking spiritually, you know, what's the other word? Existentially, maybe. I don't know if we want to go there or not, but you know, but these are things that are happening, right? And the mother is giving birth too, because the mother is giving birth to a baby, but she's also giving birth to a father. By her birthing the baby, she's also birthing this man and allowing him to become a father, but she's allowing the baby to have a father. And the same thing, the father gave the seed, which allowed the mother to be able to birth the baby. So he's giving birth to her being a mother, but he's also giving birth to the baby having a mother. Right. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. And if you don't believe that, if you want just the scientific stuff, if you don't want to go there, then scientifically, once again, using oxytocin, you can see it straight up that when the baby's inside the mother's oxytocin level goes up, right? And if the mother's oxytocin level goes up, then the baby's oxytocin level will go up. Also, too, though, if the baby's oxytocin level goes up, guess what happens sometimes? The father's oxytocin level goes up. If the father's oxytocin level goes up, the mother and the baby's level can go up, which means that everybody is really giving birth to everybody, even if you want to go scientifically, if you prefer that instead of spiritually. All right. So any way you look at it, we're all connected. We're all helping each other. We're all blessing each other. We're all growing. Like even Christ in the womb, to mess with you a little bit scientifically and theologically. You know, the first miracle, we were taught something different. The first miracle given by Christ was not turning water into wine. The first miracle given by Christ in your Bible is when John the Baptist leaps for joy in his mother's womb, in El Shabbat, or who we call Elizabeth's womb. The reason why is because John was, they actually thought he was stillborn. If you read the scripture, she says that he hadn't moved in months. And so she didn't think he was going to be alive. She was an old woman. She had never given birth before. This is her first time. And she's old. Complications arise with older women. He hasn't moved. I just don't think he's alive. And then it says that Mary hugs her when she sees her cousin. And when Mary and Elizabeth embrace and their bellies meet, it says that John leapt for joy. And then she said, because she felt her baby move for the first time, that she recognized in Mary, she said, "You, whoever you're carrying in your womb is blessed, because my baby hadn't moved. But when he touched your child through our bellies, through the water, he jumped for joy." Another interesting fact, I'm gonna get out of it because this is another thing, but this is just a little side note. Another interesting thing to study that really mess you up is that John and Christ, or John the Baptist and Yahshua HaMashiach, or Jesus Christ, if you will, they didn't meet as children, at least as far as we know. They never really met, right? However, John the Baptist is his cousin, and they don't meet again until what? Until Christ shows up again at the water for them to be baptized, for him to be baptized. First, John, I gotta allow you to leap and live. And now, John, I'm showing up because I gotta die and you gotta submerge me. Selah. All right, we're gonna go back to to the study. That's just a little something for side. That blessed me when I learned that a long time ago. I was like, man, there's so much out of that. So as we continue though, so babies are learning all that in the womb. Um, and it says interesting things about our children. Amen, Katie. And it says some very great things about our children. Um, um, in the Bible, some things like, fathers, you should be careful not to provoke your children to wrath or to anger. And really, if you were to actually break it down into Hebrew, it actually reads a little different. It reads something along the lines of, fathers, and I'm gonna make sure I get this right. So it's like more so like, fathers, be careful not to be double-minded so that your children will not get angry with you. That's really what it's saying. In other words, there's a lot of fathers out there that say one thing and do another. And if we be honest, there's a lot of mothers out there, right? That say one thing and do another. And what happens a lot of times, if we be really honest and brutally honest, there's a lot of couples that get together where you have fathers that say one thing and do another, and mothers that say one thing and do another. And they try to raise children as one, and their children say, I don't know what in the world this is. So they grow up like, what in the world is this? I don't even know what marriage is, because they're not trained. I mentioned this on one of the lines. There's a young lady I had a conversation with, and she was busy talking about how she doesn't think that she's built for marriage, but she wanted to have a bunch of children. And so I didn't say anything. I just listened to their conversation. And finally, she asked me what did I think. She didn't even know what my belief system is or anything. It's interesting how you'll just be around people talking and you just get pulled into stuff. So she asked me what did I think. I said, and I didn't even tell her a lot. I knew I only had a few seconds to really be around them before I was gonna roll. And I said, well, in all honesty, or she said, what do you think about marriage? She saw the ring or whatever. And I said, well, I think marriage is beautiful. They were like, oh, marriage is beautiful. People don't really talk about marriage. I said, in all honesty, people aren't really raised to be married. They said, what? I said, yeah, people aren't really raised to be married. So when, you have people talking about marriage, they're not really talking about it from a place where they were raised in it. So it makes sense that if people didn't know how to be husbands and wives before they got married and you put them together, then they're not successful. And so they begin to believe that it's not possible because they've never seen it. And since they've never seen it, they don't believe that it exists. So why would they do something that they weren't taught how to do? Right? And they said, and all of them just kind of nodded their heads, and then I slid on out. I did my little SpongeBob. I'm gonna head on out right now, right? Like that. But that was all I needed. But a lot of it's that can be that simple. A lot of people aren't trained on certain things. Um, I want to direct your attention. I'm not even going to turn there because you guys know it. But if you want to turn there, feel free on your own accord. If you want to spend some time looking at it as we're talking. You said, where is it in the Bible that you quoted a parent double mindedness? I was talking about it translates to that more. So it's not in English. You won't find it really in English. But if you read Ephesians, I'm sorry, where was that I was talking about? Yeah, Ephesians chapter 6. That's where it says, fathers, be careful not to provoke your children to wrath. If you read it, it really translates more into fathers, be careful to not be double minded to where your children get upset. That's really more so how it translates. Um, but yeah, that's where I was talking about. But if we go back one chapter, it's interesting. We don't put these chapters together. Ephesians, is talking about a lot of love and stuff, action, the love of Christ, even being a prisoner of Yahshua HaMashiach for the Gentiles, even. And then all of a sudden it gets into Ephesians 5, or at least we like to just jump to Ephesians 5. Ephesians 5, where it starts talking about marriage. Um, but there's some interesting thing that we have to be before we can be good teachers to our children. And we should be teaching our children these things because we should be teaching our children how to become the next generation of parents. And they should be better. Greater things should they do than us, right? Like Christ said about us, greater things should you do, so greater things should your children do. And Ephesians 5:19, um, or Paul is speaking, and he says that first and foremost, before we even talk about husbands and wives, he says, "What is it that you listen to?" And today we would say, "What do your children watch?" Back then, he was saying, "Do your children, or do you, as husband and wife, and therefore, really, do your children, as an extension of you, do you guys listen to hymns? Right? What kind of music do you listen to? Right? That's what he was talking about, hymns and stuff. But I mean, what we would say on together, what do your children watch on YouTube? How many, if they watch Disney movies, how many do they watch, and do they know what they're about? If you're going to have them watch it, do you explain why it is that monkeys sound like black people? Right? Do you explain to them why you got Jim Crow and Dumbo? you know do you explain, if you're gonna have them watch this stuff, understand they're being fed things, right? Like, are you gonna explain to them what Maui's talking about? Because when Maui sings a song, you're welcome, it's a nice catchy song and everything, but when you listen to the lyrics, which the children learn the lyrics now and they can sing it even if you can't, when he sings those lyrics and he starts speeding up real quick, he just conveniently speeds up and starts talking about how he pulled the moon down and did this and all this stuff. He's telling you a lot of stories that are actually pretty devastating. It's a lot of spiritual stuff in that one little song where it's talking about some demonic stuff, or how like he had to like bleed into water for stuff to be able to happen before he could get the sun to come down. There's a lot of wild stuff that's just being thrown in there. And they're not giving you the whole story in the song, but they're telling you enough where it's like, you know, when I catch this stuff, or you run into a crab all of a sudden down there, it's fascinated with gold, and they got a scene of the person of this crab that's like talking about how much he loves things that are shiny or whatever, and that's one of the most popular songs. Like, they're feeding your children. So when your children are watching this, Paul says first and foremost, as a husband and wife, and as a mother and father, therefore. Um, oh, you were talking about James 1:8. Okay, James 1:8 is where it talks about double mindedness. That's more so talking about prayer. Sorry. Yeah, but I was talking more so about Ephesians 6. However, I'm sorry, to get back what I was talking about. Yeah. So you have a lot of stuff that's thrown out there. What are you listening to? What are your children listening to? Like even when your children are watching oh yeah, no problem, Katie. That's what I was saying. I was trying to tell you where I was because I just saw in the comment section you said Ephesians James chapter 1. I was talking about Ephesians chapter 6. No problem, no worries. Um but yeah, so when we're talking about, I'm sorry, where am I going to? Oh yeah, so when we're talking about this Ephesians chapter 5 verse 19, first things first, before you even get to verse 21, which talks about submission, it says um yep, so that's great. So what's this? So Ephesians 5:19, it says, first and foremost, what do you listen to? Today we would say, what do you watch on television? What do your children learn from teachers at school? You know how many parents, it's surprising to me when I do like coaching sessions, parents don't even know what their children learn in school. It doesn't make it doesn't really make sense. But it does because parents are supposed to work like slaves, and children are supposed to learn how to become slaves. And slaves have different jobs on the plantation, so they come back home and they both tired. Maybe you eat together. A lot of people don't even eat. You remember people used to. Some of us don't didn't even have this. What I'm about to say happened to. But you remember people used to eat at the table together. Like I remember growing up and eating dinner at the table. Now my dad wasn't there because he worked two and a half jobs, but I remember coming home and like mom would have dinner ready, and if dad was there, dad, quote unquote, dad had to get the big piece of chicken, whatever. But I remember all that, and you sat down, and somebody said, "How was your day at school today, Kofi?" And you, "Oh well, mom, we learned this, and Mrs. So and so taught us this." "Oh, really? That's great. Yeah, and they also taught about that." "Oh, really? Well, we don't believe in that in that house. This house, Kofi. Like we don't do that. We don't teach that. The Bible says blah blah." Like we used to have conversations like that. Nowadays, is people just like, "Oh, you home? Okay, I put something in the microwave for you, baby. It's good." Right? There ain't even no big pieces of chicken. The big piece of chicken has become Hungry Man. Everybody else eats the regular TV dinner, and then Daddy can have Hungry Man. And that's about it, right? But these are things that children are learning or not learning, right? Even if you got to teach, show, go to school with them, like yeah, like even when we do homeschooling, for example, we still teach them stuff that they learn in school, but we teach them both. So my son needs to know about the United States. He also needs to know about the United States of America. My son needs to know that that's George Washington on the $1 bill. He also needs to know that George Washington isn't somebody you need to worry about. We're going to go to his house at some point soon. He's like one of the only presidents in Virginia that we haven't gone to his house. We gone to everybody else's house, all the other slave owners. I thought we were going to be able to go for free. I didn't know that they forced you to pay to go to his. And actually, they forced you to go to pay for all their houses. Yeah, I guess so. Anyways, but that teaching your children, what do they listen to? What have you established for a child? What do they listen to? Also, too, train up a child in the way that they should go. Is there a particular way that boys are supposed to be raised? Because people do this. Well, that's my child. I'm gonna raise them however God tells me to raise them. Well, God has already written it down. It's in the Bible. Will you raise your child the way that they're supposed to be raised? Don't do like we have these false senses of stuff. So, for example, we might have to come back to this because I don't think we're gonna even hit half the stuff I have written down for you all. In all honesty, um, so we might have to come back to this next week and start where we're gonna leave off tonight because there's some craziness that's going on. I just have to direct this to your attention. Think about how many of your boys and well your children because it's for everybody. But think about how many of them go to school. Man, I mean, there's so many different ways. Holy Spirit, help me to go in a certain direction because there's so many ways I want to go. Okay, amen. Think about how many of your children are going to school and they have to pass a test that is going to that once they pass that test, they're never going to need what they use to pass that test ever again. All right, let's be honest. How many of you guys are using trigonometry on a regular basis? Maybe somebody out there is. But I'm just saying, how many of y'all are using trig equations? How many of you guys, when you get ready to go through your day, when's the last time you pulled out your TI-82 or your TI-85 or whatever you were using, right? To make sure, when's the last time that you used cosine on an equation, right? I'm just saying, I'm not saying that these things have no purpose, but we're not making sure the children are raised in their purpose. And fathers and mothers are supposed to do that more than anybody else. Fathers, all the stuff we're talking about with the fathers and mothers is supposed to translate to your children. If you know each other's love language, like I'll have fathers that call me and be like, "Man, I don't know what to do with my son. Man, my son's out here. He's just abrasive. He's got anger issues. He got blah blah. And I just listen to him. I listen to him, and I'm like, okay, can I ask a question real quick? And they say, well, yeah. And I say, what is your son's love language? They're like, love language. I was like, yeah, you and your wife have love languages, right? What's your love language? What's hers? And they're like, I don't even know what that is. Oh, well, that's the problem. If you don't have it at a husband wife level, you can't train up a child. So your child is not getting what they need to be able to communicate in the way they do. So they're going to communicate any kind of way to get what? Your attention. That's what the child wants. Look at me, right? My son will do wild stuff sometimes if he's not getting attention, just to do what? Look at me. Almost breaking his neck on stuff because he trying to say, "Look at me, Dad." It's like, son, you ain't got to do all that, man. You need a hug. Come on, I'm sorry, I didn't know you didn't get a hug the way you need it today because he needs affection. He needs physical touch. He needs quality time. Okay, I'm sorry. So here you go. Like, what's up? I'm sorry. You okay? You good? Okay, and then he ain't gonna do nothing wild for the rest of the day because he got what he needed. Right. So I'm listening to brothers tell me all this stuff. He's always got to be up, fathers especially. He always got to be up under me. Mothers do that too. They're always child, always up under me, this and that. I'm like, yeah, well, how much time do you set aside, even if it's 15 minutes a day? Do you set aside time where they can just be up under you and nothing else? You're not worried about anybody else. You're not doing anything. Can you give them 15 minutes a day? I promise you it's going to go away. As soon as they do it, they come back. Wow, you know what? That was a blessing. The Holy Spirit really talked to you. I was like, this is stuff that you should know. I mean, the Holy Spirit might bring it to my remembrance, but you could have read a book. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is stuff in your word. Watch this. The Bible even talks about how men and women, and therefore sons and daughters, react different to problems that happen. Um, David was more shocked. Remember when we were talking about David and Bathsheba this morning, right? Was it this morning? No, yesterday. Yesterday morning. We were talking about David and Bathsheba. And when you talk about David and Bathsheba, um, we didn't talk about this specifically, but remember they end up losing their first child together. Solomon is their second child that they have. Solomon becomes king. The first child he's not allowed to keep because he sinned, and that child represented the fruit of their sinning and killing Uriah off, basically, right? So if you look at what happens in this, when the way the story plays out, David is worried before the baby's gonna die. David is David is like pacing back and forth. David is frustrated. He's praying. He's saying, "Please, y'all, can we change this up? I'll do anything." He's worried. He's concerned. He's not sleeping at all. People are like, "Please go to sleep, David. You need to sleep. You're the king. You need to make decisions." He's like, "Man, I can't." He's losing his mind. They're thinking he's going crazy. The baby dies, and everybody says, "Oh, he was already crazy. He was wilding out before. We don't know what he's going to do now." You know what David does? It says that when they said, they didn't even want to tell him the baby had died, but somebody finally goes and tells him the baby dies. It says that David got up, went and finally cleaned himself for the first time. He was stinking. He smelled. He went and finally took a bath, and then he said he went to the temple. And then after he got himself together and prayed and said, "Okay, it is what it is," it said then he had to go and comfort Bathsheba, because men and boys actually deal with stuff different. If it's gonna happen, men kind of get worried and stuff. But once it happens, shoot, I got to deal with it now. Now I got to go into whatever mode, right? Like ladies will be upset when something bad happens because they'll be like, "Oh, why aren't you moving? Why aren't you upset? Don't you know this is happening? We could lose this. We could lose that. We're losing the money." And the man is like, at this point, it happened. I'm ready to do what we got to do to make a change. But beforehand, Bathsheba, she wasn't doing all that. Bathsheba was calm, like, "Baby, please, hopefully you'll be okay. Hopefully things will be all right." But then everything happened. Now she's freaking out. David's got to now switch, right? So before and after trauma, even with babies, with our children, have you learned how to be able to manage even that part of love language? Have you learned how to raise them in that way? Have you learned how to deal with the woman in that way? Remember, like we've even talked about the differences in men and women, where like men have to do something enough times to start feeling it. Women have to feel something enough times to start doing it, right? Same thing with sons and daughters, right? It's weird that we'll give our sons the leeway that we won't give our husbands, you know? But your son, your son has to do something over and over and over again to finally start saying, "Oh, okay, I guess there's some good in this," right? You know, maybe, if I do this over and over again, maybe there's something good. But girls, like if they don't feel like doing something, they don't do it. And if they feel like, and if you can help them to feel better about it, and they go ahead and do it. Boy, he'll just jump. I don't know what's something. What do you call those? My son loves to go on those. What do you call those? Zip line. Boy just gonna go on the zip line just because. Like you ain't gotta talk, you ain't really gotta coax him into it. I told the one of the gentlemen I was talking to about love languages. I said, okay, here's the deal. You need to make sure that your son's love language is taken care of, right? He likes to have time, so you got to give him time, a little bit of time every day, just to make sure that it's his time. I promise he's going to change. After he started changing, then you know what I said? I said, don't stop there. I said, you and your wife need to have conversations about what your love language is. I said, then you, your wife, and your family need to sit down and have conversations about what each other's love language is and educate each other. That way, when your son, watch this. See, this is how you get your family to start uniting and learning, and older siblings can even do stuff with younger siblings for you. You start saying, hey, to the 17-year-old, the 5-year old is acting a fool, right? But the 5-year old needs quality time. I got to do this for your mom right now, and your mom's at the store. Can you make sure that you go outside and play ball with them for about 15 minutes? They'll be okay. Just give them like 15 minutes. They just need to make sure that they get affection right now. I'll come and give them some affection later, but I can't do it right now. Please do that for me. And because I've taught everybody about love language, they go, oh, okay, I get it. Like he needs quality time. And boom, and then they go, right? And I've taught also to the other one so that if another one comes to one that needs words, um, uh, words of affirmation, then if that person seems to be down, I can say something like, "Oh, so and so is feeling down." Everybody goes, "Oh man, you're so great, you're so wonderful," and we do it, and it seems like you're joking about it, but they start laughing because they feel good, even though they know we're like just doing it because we sit, but they laugh, right? Because hey, yeah, okay, that is my love language. Thank you, I really appreciate. You can see them go from like in seconds from to like start smiling and be like, okay, I get it, right? But we put a smile on your face. We spoke your language, even if it was only for 2 minutes of just irritate to do it to even irritate you. You came out of the irritation smiling. You came out of it laughing, right? Like these are things we should be doing to raise our families, but nobody's giving us these keys to the kingdom, right? And it's sad because here's the thing: when we don't do this and we cause generational curses to continue, this now let's get into kingdom law. This is what Yahshua Hamashiach told us. It's he calls us stumbling blocks when we do this to other people and when we do this to our children. And he said, and he already told us what it is, what the worst thing that would happen to you, right? If you're a stumbling block, we already know. He told us what that is. Let's see. I'm sorry. You said it's a lot. Uh, I do fall short on what my 5-year-old has seen on different social media the sites like TikTok and YouTube. Yeah, yeah, and a lot of us do. By the way, there's stuff I literally every day because my son is at the age where he can read, but he's at the age where he doesn't even read what's there. He just sees a picture, just clicks and sees a picture and clicks, right? So I have to go behind him or in front of him sometimes, but usually I can't beat him to it because I'm gone all day. So I get back and then I'm like, okay, I gotta I gotta go through this and I gotta scroll through it. I literally have to go through like all these videos and stuff and say, okay, don't put it back on the screen. Don't put it back on the screen. Don't send it to us again. Don't recommend this channel. And I have to screen everything that he watches because he will just keep clicking on stuff. And I mean, it's stuff that you think would be, that's the way they set it up. You think it's cool and everything, and then you start watching it. I don't know if any of you parents have heard any of these terms, but there's stuff out there like Siren Head, which is like one of the most demonic things ever. And there's like all these different movies. I watch them and it's like stuff that scares you as an adult. Like they got these scenes where you see it's basically supposed to be like this big. I mean, it's not Godzilla as far as girth or size, but it's basically supposed to be the size of like Godzilla. But it's this it's like this male, masculine, really like muscular body, but it has the head of a siren, and it's got like two mouths or something, and it has no eyes or nothing like that, and it basically just devours people, and all these children are in the Siren Head. And so my son's talking about Siren Head. I don't know what this is. And so he's like, "You want to watch Siren Head with me, Dad?" And I'm like, "Cool." You got to be careful too, because you always got to keep up. This is something I've learned too. Make sure you always keep up communication with your children. Because if your children, the second they start deciding they're not going to share stuff with you because they don't believe they can trust you. In other words, like my son, if he shows me something and he doesn't know that it's bad, I can't just jump down the street and be like, "Oh, this is terrible. How dare you watch blah, blah, blah." Right? Because he's not gonna trust me with it anymore. So I have to watch it with them and be like, as much as I want to start pitching the fit, okay, son, I see what this is. I know that you enjoy it. I need you to know that there's a lot of demonic stuff going on with this. This is not what's supposed to happen. There's a lot of blah blah. Oh, really? Yeah, it's not. Yeah, I mean, think about stuff that we've talked about in the Bible, right? Does this make sense? Is there a such thing as a siren that eats people? Is there a such blah blah blah? Like, or he used to try and get into Halloween stuff. He used to get mad that he couldn't do Halloween. We wouldn't let him do Halloween, but he got to a certain age where we had a conversation every time. Hey, look, why would you want to dress up as somebody? Do you think it's okay to dress up and be bloody and act like you're going to kill somebody? Like, what does that even mean? And at 2, 3 years old, he finally started getting it. But he was mad like a lot of children. But or what they tell us our children are now, he doesn't care for it anyways, because he recognizes it as something that's demonic. Now he understands what demonic is. But these are things that are there. Like, what, going back to Ephesians 5:19, what do your children watch? Then Ephesians 5:21 says, let us submit ourselves one to another, talking about husband and wife. Once your children are being guided by the correct stuff as far as what they're watching or what they're hearing, what they're praying about, what they're receiving, now it's easy for them to submit. Why children, a lot of times, if you talk about, like, a lot of people just be like, my child is headstrong, they just don't listen, they're so stubborn, blah blah. You want to know why a lot of children don't listen? Look at what they're watching. What they're watching teaches them not to submit. Why would they submit? If, like, look, I love me some stuff like that, but what is recess about? You remember back in the day, recess? If you, I don't know, you got to be from a certain time period, I guess it depends on what your age is. But if you watch recess, or your children watch recess, or you heard about recess, I don't know. Recess is a Disney cartoon where basically every episode was about fighting the establishment. Everybody that was in authority was bad, and everybody that wasn't in authority was good. Right? And the goal was always to make every day like recess. That's basically what it was. The only thing that mattered in school was recess, the time that you can play. Right. And I'm not mad at it in a sense, because it kind of teaches about how crazy it is to have children basically in cubicle type settings and asking them to be able to make fun out of it 8 hours a day. But, still, like, um, you know, people worship stuff that's about chaos. Why do you think people like Thanos? You think people like Thanos just because Thanos was chaos? Now he said, "I'm gonna be so chaotic, I'm gonna bring order." That's satanic. But a lot of people identify with Thanos more than identify with the heroes, even though the heroes are technically demonic too. That's a whole nother conversation. But what are your children into, right? What were you raised on? How many brothers out there were raised on He-Man? He-Man is straight up homosexual. I mean, I don't have to work that hard to make it work. Just think about how He-Man dresses. Think about when he's Adam, right? Even they use the word Adam to try and get some wild stuff going there. That's a whole nother discussion. Maybe we'll talk about that. We'll see how we're led in our satanic cinema series. But they even had a He-Man movie that was even more demonic than the cartoon. If you remember how Skeletor looked or whatever, I don't know if you saw it or not. I think it was the '80s or early '90s, something like that. Had the dude that played He-Man was the dude from who played the Russian guy in Rocky 4, Rocky 5, whichever one that was. Um, so, like, it's a lot of stuff that your children are seeing. And yeah, we're definitely gonna have to revisit this, because we're not even close to some of the stuff that I wanted to go go over. But it's important that you see these things, right? You have to begin to start giving your being united as one family. Your children need mother and father. If they don't have both, they need somebody who's in mother type role and a father type role, right? They need it. Um, we're in a world today, and even here's the deal. Here's the sad part. We don't even have adults that are even attempting to be mothers and fathers. We have grown children. We got 40-year-old father, 40-year-old sons with babies, or I'm sorry, 40-year-old boys with babies and 40-year-old girls with babies, that don't even know how to act themselves. That think that it's cute. That this is what's being taught. We have a generation that's being taught, on one hand, try to pass school, being taught on the other hand, hey, go ahead and learn about, a little bit of Black history here and there, and then at the same time, we're trying to tell them, go ahead and twerk. 2 years old, baby can't spell twerk. Baby can't even say the ABCs, but they can twerk. Twerking in Pampers. You need to change that diaper while you twerking. It's pooping that diaper, but you twerking. But that's what's going on. That's what's being taught. And why? Where did they learn it from? They learned it because mama was around the house twerking. Heck, some of them learned it because they got two daddies in the house and they both twerking. I mean, this is where we are. And so it's hard for us. Like somebody asked me even to write, they were like, why don't you write a book about parenthood? I was like, in all honesty, I'm still learning because I've got so much jacked up stuff in me. Like I used to think it was only 10 years ago. I thought it was acceptable to let my children watch Disney cartoons still. And I knew there was bad stuff in it. I still was like, well, they won't catch it. They catch everything. What's interesting when somebody started talking about all the Disney stuff and I was an adult, I could actually remember everything they were talking about. Like when they'd be like, man, when Mufasa laid down in the grass, it said sex in the air. And I didn't have to look for a picture of it. I just thought about it and I was like, I think I remember seeing sex in the air. Like I caught it. I didn't think about it, but I did catch it. It was in my spirit. As soon as they said it, I could see the letters forming in the air. Right now, I went and caught it just to make sure that wasn't of myself. But I saw exactly the way I saw it in my mind was exactly the way I saw it in the scene. It was like picture perfect match. It was in my head when somebody said Jim Crow. I knew what they were talking about because I'd watched all the Disney movies growing up, even the stuff that people ain't seen from like the 20s, 30s, and 40s. Or I'm not 20s, excuse me, like the 40s rather. Stuff like that. Stuff like I knew what it was. I'd seen the stuff with Donald Duck dressed up as Hitler, but I was like a little baby. I didn't know what that was. But I remember as soon as somebody said, Donald Duck was dressed up as Hitler for one cartoon and was like speaking German and all this stuff and Walt Disney this and that or whatever. I was like, oh yeah, I already know what that is. I don't even need to see that again. This is what happens with our children. Our children are bombarded all the time. And you would be surprised, the first porno that I ever saw in a sense, right? Now, obviously, it's because I was oversexed already as a child, and so it shouldn't have meant this to me if I was in my culture. But first porno that a lot of boys even see, they start looking at stuff like National Geographic, stuff like that from back in the day, and all that. And then, really, for honestly, I had a serious pornography issue at one point in my life, and what got me into it was my father had a stash, married man, everything, had a box that I came across. I don't even think I was old enough to, forgive me for if this is TMI, but I don't even think I was old enough to ejaculate yet. I just happened to see this box in the closet and it had three X's on it. And I knew enough to be like, huh, is that really what I think it is? And I watched it. And from that point on, before I could even do anything, I literally was fascinated with the female's body like I had never been before. And I'm talking about everything. I was fascinated with female muscular women like bodybuilders. I was fascinated with women that were more, hourglass, women that were quote unquote whatever we call them, thick or whatever. Like all these different things. I was fascinated, and then all of a sudden the sexual drive kicked in when I hit puberty, and now you got somebody that got to a place in his life at one point where he couldn't be away from the computer, more than a few hours at a time. Right? It started in my childhood. You'd be surprised what your children are watching. So even the things that you think you're doing in secret, right, are things that aren't really secret. Your children know a lot of stuff. Your children know your stashes. Children get in trouble all the time to hurt themselves with weapons because people think that they got weapons in places that nobody can get to them. And children already know where the key is and stuff. They play with them all the time. Next thing you know, you hear in the news, so and so's child found something in the cabinet, went outside to play with friends, you know, didn't know how to handle it, thought the weapon discharged or whatever, did something crazy that you're not supposed to do. Like, why isn't this weapon fire? Boom, it's over, right? Because that your child, you thought you knew what your child was going through, but that's only what you know about. And so, we got a lot more to get into. I really didn't get into a lot. I'm gonna try and make sure that we kind of get through it. We'll probably like do a half and half class next year or next year, next session, or maybe we'll do like 15 minutes to start to kind of finish this up, and then we'll go into the next part. But there's so much in this, right? And how are your children, right, going to be raised if you aren't one together first? And here's one other thing I'm gonna leave, and then I'm gonna leave on this because we're already over time. So let's leave with this as a salah to get us to think until next week. There are many couples. I think I've mentioned this before on the line, but let me just leave it like this. There are many couples that have menage a trois and don't even know it, which sounds odd. This is what I mean. That there are so many of you that are trying to raise your children based off of what somebody else does, and you're trying to be husband and wife based off of what somebody else does, that every day, every night when you try to go to sleep, you can't. You're always arguing or you're always not able to sleep looking at your partner in disgust or whatever, because you're thinking to yourself, well, so and so does this, and so does that with their wife, and so does that with their children. You got all these other people in your bed, and you can't even have a meaningful relationship with the one you're supposed to become one with. And so your children are suffering even in that. I want you to pray about that thing that causes you to look at other people. We think that being covetous just means that we want somebody's wife, or we want their building or something. No, like you can want what somebody else is doing with their spouse or with their children, and it's not for you, right? I know there's somebody out there that has their children in 15 different sports all year round and does this and that or whatever. Is your child supposed to be in that, or is your child supposed to become the next orator? If so, they need to start involving them. You need to start putting them on circuits where they speak. You know, is your child supposed to be the next person who's going to write the next version um, of Rich Dad Poor Dad or something like that? If so, they need to start getting into finances. They can start getting the finances at 2 years old. So by the time they hit 15, they've already got wealth established, right? Like, is your child supposed to be just like, see, this is what school, one of the reasons why school can be dangerous is because a lot of people just send your child to school and say, hey, get a good grade and everything that everybody else has to do. What is your child called to do? And are you busy going to sleep trying to figure out how tomorrow you're going to make sure that your children can do what everybody else does? Are you busy trying to make sure that you come up with more night plans to ensure that your children are going to grow into who they're supposed to be? Because if you don't allow them to, they'll never be the husband and wife they're supposed to, and they're going to fail their spouse, because the only way that they can be successful at being themselves is to be themselves, right? Please stop trying to make your child be about the dreams and goals that you have. Some of you guys won't let go, and you go to sleep every night. You know that's what they call, what do they call that? Somebody help me, with the fathers or mothers even do it too, when they couldn't be sports stars, so they want their children to be sports stars, whatever they call that. Living vicariously through the child, is that what they say? Something like that. um you're living through the child, and the child don't even want to play that sport, or the child might be good at that sport, but that's not what they're really supposed to do, you know. Okay, thank you, Kay. Yeah, that's it. So make sure that you are not having these weird relationships to where you're actually not even faithful to your own marriage, and therefore you can't be faithful to your children, your family, where you keep trying to establish, well, so and so does this with their children, so that's what I'm gonna do. Do what the Bible says do, but also the Bible gives you leeway to do what? To be an individual and allow your child to be an individual. You are supposed to become one with your spouse so that you and your spouse can raise your child the same way. And Proverbs chapter 1 verse 8 says that the father's goal in being one is to lay down instruction, and to trust the mother to do what? To lay down the law. He says this is what Yah has told us as a family, vision wise. The mother says, I take that and I incubate it, just like I take the sperm and I turn it into a baby. I take the instruction and I'm able to do things with it that the father can't do on his own. I'm a helpmeet. I help him to meet things that he'd never be able to do without me. I'm the incubator. He gives seed, but I'm the incubator. What good is the seed if the seed doesn't grow and emit multiple cells, right? So that's what we need you to start doing, is try your best when you get in these relationships and these marriages before you get married, for some of you, to not be in a position where you're bringing something else in. Or you even hear people all the time, I was spanked all the time when I was a child, and I'm not going to spank my child because I didn't like it. Well, what if your child needs spankings? Well, I wasn't spanked at all as a child, but you know what, I think I might spank my child, because what if your child doesn't need spankings? you know, like my sister got hit one time by my father. It was popped in her leg when she was a little girl. She cried like somebody had like beat the brakes off her, because she had her feelings hurt because daddy touched her leg, and that was the last time he had to touch her. From that point on, she was straight. Now I was different, right? But you had two children in the same household, right? We had another child, another sibling too, but he was much younger than us. By the time I was getting ready to go in the military, pretty much he was still like not even in high school yet, not even junior high, I don't think yet. But or no, he wasn't even in out of elementary school yet. Wow. but but like we had two children basically growing up together, completely different. Boy, girl, one doesn't need discipline, one needs a whole bunch of it. Not respectful, one is completely respectful. So dealing with a lot of different stuff or whatever. So just utilize that. I want you to pray on that, even if you're not married yet. Make it your prayer, make it your business to meditate on, who are you, who do you need to be, Even if you haven't had children yet, because what's going to happen is your children are going to just be nothing more than reflections of you. It's funny now. People will always be, even when I'm not somewhere. My wife went to a wedding I wasn't able to attend, and first thing she said and first thing people told me is, "Man, your son, he just acts just like you. His mannerisms, blah blah blah. He speaks like you now. He talking about marriage and God and all this stuff." And I was like, "Yeah, that's my boy. He should be." Like, why wouldn't he sound like me? But also too, I know this is like before he can even get angry about stuff. I already catch it. I already know he about to get angry because he has my temper. And people be like, Kofi, you got a temper? I never, yeah, I got a temper. You gotta hit the right button. It's very hard, but you hit the right button. I got a temper for you. I've told you guys, you mess with my family, I got something for you. You'll see a different part of me come out, right? And it's not always sanctified and holy either. I'm gonna keep it keep it 100. That's when I got to be in prayer, right? And y'all got to pray for a brother. But but I know that about my son. I got anger issues, so because I have anger issues because I wanted to be perfect in everything. I was perfectionist. I had to learn how not to be that over years and years and years. So um, all of my boys, honestly, and one of my girls, they like to be perfectionists. They have to be. Everything has to be perfect, and if not, they start stomping around and getting upset and apologizing profusely and saying that they're not good enough. And it's like, whoa, 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 okay, I get it. Like, and I have to tell them, like, even with music, they'll be sitting there, Brother Kenyatta, you can attest to this, right? That as musicians, yes, we get better. We make a lot. We don't really make certain mistakes and certain things that we can. But I tell people all the time when I'm playing music, doesn't matter what instrument. It's like if you listen to me, I probably messed up like 25 times when I'm playing. You didn't even know, but it wasn't your business to know. And if I learned how to play well enough, if I mess up, can I turn that mistake into something that's glorious anyways? That becomes a whole nother challenge, right? So, but my son be playing with me and be like, oh, I can't do it. And I'm like, just understand, like, first of all, I've been doing this for like my whole life, like since I was like 4 or 5 years old. So, I got some experience in this. Secondly, though, son, I mess up all the time. Like, I mess up all the time. But one thing that they taught me was to not focus on the mistakes so much that everybody else knows I messed up. Nobody else has to know I messed up except me and the Most High. Nobody has to know. Even other musicians, even if they catch it, they'll smile and look at you and be like, okay, whatever, let's keep on going, right? It's just a little hiccup. Nobody cares. Nobody's going to bring it up again. But if you stop playing, everybody knows you messed up, right? And I know that about him, about any of my children, because I know myself. And I've never lied to myself and been like, oh, you're not a perfect. I still do. So I have to be careful in front of you all. I mess up on scriptures or verses or things like that all the time. Be like, oh, I really meant this. But you don't ever really hear me stop anymore. Because I'm like, well, yeah, I'm a human being. I mess up. But my child might not be there. So learn these things about yourself. Learn how to crucify your flesh daily. However, when you crucify the flesh, right, don't act like your children don't have your DNA, and stop bringing other people's stuff in because other people aren't designed to raise your child. That's why it's your child, or at least if some people want to get holy on you, it's the Most High's child. Man, okay, all right, it's your responsibility. Whatever it is, that's your responsibility. And that child is your responsibility. Because even if you look at Yashua and Hamashiach, Joseph still had to train him. That's why Yashua was a carpenter. Why? Because his daddy was a carpenter. Joseph said, even though you the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and it's gonna be your name is gonna be above every other name. Oh, you 7 years old? Okay, you my apprentice. You're gonna learn how to make some tables. Right? Like, you might be the King of Kings, but you're gonna learn how to do this today. Because you're gonna be obedient to the law, and I'm gonna be obedient to the law. I'm your daddy on this earth right now. And so as long as I'm your daddy, whatever I do, you do. And that's what he had to do. So if he took it that much, then we should as well. So be careful how much stuff you're bringing from other people. A lot of people are messing up in their relationships and with their children because you're busy being like, so and so does this, the school system says I should do this, the news said I should do this, the Democratic Party said that, the Republican Party, Black Lives Matter said, like, know of all these things, but that has nothing to do with your child. Who is your child called to be? And a lot of times you'll find out who your child is called to be because they're supposed to be a reflection of you. Solomon understood who he was because his dad, he knew who his daddy was. Yah comes to him in the dream. Yah says, hey, Solomon, what do you want? I'll give you anything you want on this planet. Just tell it. Just say it to me. I got you. And he says, man, look, my daddy did this and this and this and this and this. I don't know how to do any of it. So I just want to be like my dad. Help me be like him. He said, wow, because you asked that thing, right? Return the fathers returning to the children returning to the father. Malachi chapter 4, verse 6. He said, because you got that straight and you're legal now, not only will I give you what you asked for, but I'm going to give you wisdom, and or I'm going to give you the wisdom your daddy didn't even have. And then on top of that, I'm going to make you rich. You didn't even ask for that, but because you got the law right, I'm required by law these stipulations that come with this truth you just gave me in the court of law. Not only should I give you what you asked for, I have to give it to you multiplied, and then I got to give you extra on top of it just because you asked correctly, because you weren't focused on everybody else. You knew what your daddy did. So, anyways, we can keep on going and going on this. As you can see, there's so much more we can go. I'm gonna try and figure out a way to shorten what we have left, or maybe we won't. We'll just be led. I don't know. But y'all pray. Hopefully, you got something out of this. There's so many places I want to go, but I'm gonna be obedient. I really want to keep going, but we're already over time, so I apologize for that. Does anybody? I see some stuff in the chat, so I'm gonna ask. I'm looking at that I'm looking at that. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns, or anything that we talked about today? You said, I know what you mean. I have to remember they don't. Why it's so terrible? Yeah, overthrowing the government and anarchy. Wow, Minister Nice. Yeah, way to put that together. Katie says Ephesians 5:19 is next week. I saw that. Yeah, so Ephesians 5:19, we talked about something. Really, Ephesians 5:19 leads us into Ephesians 5:21. Ephesians 5:21 leads us into Ephesians 5:22, which is the wives. Ephesians 5:22 leads us into Ephesians 5:25, which is the husbands. And then Ephesians 6 is where then it says, now that we've got that together, what about your children? And then after it talks about the children, let's leave it at this. Here's a little homework assignment. All right. Little homework assignment. Let's go down that path if you can remember this. All right. Ephesians 5:19 we talked about tonight. So we kind of already have Ephesians 5:19. All right. Just real quick, real quick. All right, we'll be done by 10:15. It's 10:14 now, so I'm not going to go to 10:16. All right, here we go. Real quick. So you got to write, if you're writing this down, write it down. If you need to screen record, I don't know what you need to do. If you need to look at the recording, I'm at the 1 minute and seven or 1 hour and 7 minute mark. Okay. Here we go. Quick homework assignment. Ephesians 5:19 we talked about tonight. Ephesians 5:21 comes next. After we get Ephesians 5:19, you got to figure out how to make Ephesians 5:21 work, right? Then I want you to study Ephesians 5:22, because if you get Ephesians 5:21, Ephesians 5:22 should be easy for us wives, right? Those of us that are wives, it should be easy for you, including myself, because I'm a wife of the Most High, right? Then Ephesians 5:25 comes behind that, and it talks to us as husbands. Okay. And then once we get that down, I want you to look into Ephesians chapter 6, from where it talks about fathers, don't provoke your sons to wrath, because now it says that the children are affected. And then after that, I want you to look at where it says putting on the whole suit of armor. If your children are now taught correctly, they have the full armor of Elohim. We don't look at these things holistic, but that's actually what that says. Okay. So I appreciate you all. I'm not going to break my promise. It's 10:15. Thank you for being on. I appreciate the king, queen, and each and every one of you. If you have more questions, just contact me. You know the number. We appreciate you all. Have a great night. Shalom to you. Remember, as always, that you are loved, you are necessary, you are majestic, you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and you, which is all of us working together, will be the reason why this world changes for the better. Bare minimum will be the reason why people who are in the system no longer have to be of it. Shalom, fam. Peace. Shalom, everybody. Shalom, bro.